issues with every.
I have to clear. When do my role?
Dale Olson.
Here.
Kurt Osbacher.
Here.
Brian Parker.
Here.
Patty Chapel.
Present.
Charles Kimball.
Here.
All right.
Staff.
Staff side,
Staff.
Kyle Rodman,
Wendy McKay.
Kelly Strange.
Mark Rammer.
Alicia Burgess. Sarah Klein.
Rob Courier. Doug Barrow. Rob Roder. Thank you. Are there any yes online?
you have a number of guests. Let's see, maybe Eco, you guys wanna go first, Kylie and Sean?
Yeah, just quick introducing myself. Yeah. Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Kylie. I'm here with Eco Engineers. We're really playing an advisory role in the RFP process, which we'll kind of cover here in a minute. But yeah, nice to meet you guys.
And then Sean Gasson from Eco Engineers.
Thanks for being here. And then we have Scott and Stacy, you all wanna say hi real quick?
Sure, yeah. Scott Bauer, Northwest Municipal Advisors, will be talking to your topic number 4 today.
And Stacy Omasaki from Foster Garvey, and we're bond counsel.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And I see Ron on there too. His audio is not connecting yet, but he's trying to log in.
Is there any changes to the agenda and timeline?
Not from staff.
Okay, what about the update?
All right, Rob, we'll do a quick intro from the staff side, and then we'll let Eco give their lay of the land in terms of these offers that we've received and some of the current market dynamics we're seeing out there. So I've tried to keep everybody up to date on the status of this RFP process. I think it's moving in a very productive direction. We're getting toward the next step, which is the intent to award that we're going to issue next week. Before we do that, we're planning to do some reference checking on our preferred bidder. So we're going to be talking to, there's one current installation back in New York that they've done that we're going to try to reach out to and talk with. And then there's a couple in California that are under construction as we speak, and we're going to reach out to them as well. Just to kind of do some diligence there. I mean, they already come very highly recommended from a lot of folks that we've spoken with, but we want to kind of dive just a little bit deeper before that next step moves forward here. So with that, I'm going to let Rob run through a little bit of the timeline with you, and then we're talking about next steps.
Yeah, just quickly, we put this in the memo for you guys, just to kind of update where we're at in the process. We released the RFP back in November, and for the last couple of weeks, we've done multiple interviews. We've engaged quite a bit with Eco. We've done our own financial analysis, and they've done their own, and we've compared those two of the proposals. And we're kind of at the end here of this first phase of the process, we're calling it. I'm thinking of it as that we'd like to issue this intent to award, which really unlocks the next phase, which is direct negotiation with our preferred proposer and talking to Lane County about some kind of mechanisms that are in our current contract that I would like to talk to them about. So that's where things stand. I don't know, I think we're going to let Eco kind of run through, try to characterize the proposals that we got. You guys have seen all the detail, but we really want them to let their voice be heard here to share their impressions of the proposals and kind of characterize the marketplace and how those proposals really fit into kind of broader national landscape.
Part of that, just to give you some context, is going to be deal structure. So we have a lot of options in terms of how we choose to move forward with the selected party, and they'll go into some of that. But it's again, upfront payments versus longer term royalty arrangements. There's some options to do fixed price agreements versus more variable kind of spot market. We'll talk about some of that as we get into contract negotiation, but I think all those things are on the table, and Eco has some context they can provide around that too.
Any questions about the process, where we're at, where we've been?
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, sure.
Put it out there and here they come.
It is nice, yes, people are interested.
You guys have like been doing really good
Well-
diligence, and I know that all these interviews have been a lot.
Yeah.
So,
They have been, it's been, yeah, it's definitely
And
been
that's-
interesting.
and the further you go, probably the further you should perhaps look,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I have
Team.
Chad, our attorney, is waiting in the wings to
Oh,
do
good.
this negotiation. We expect it'll take probably 2 to 3 months to work through things. And the board will have plenty of decision points along the way to weigh in with, but that's kind of the timeline.
Kylie, I'm happy to drive, if you wanna just let us know when you wanna move forward.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah, so I'm really just gonna cover a summary of the work that we've done in collaboration with Rob and Kyle and the team over at Emerald. As far as, you know, assessing and trying to maximize the value of the landfill gas rights at Short Mountain. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so really just keeping this goal in mind as we were working together, we're really trying to determine the highest and the best use of the landfill gas at the Short Mountain landfill. And the path that we were really going down and exploring was some sort of landfill gas utilization project where someone could come in, develop a project. They would purchase the gas rights, or the gas rights contract with Lane County would be transferred to them, and they would develop a project at the site. Emerald would be all out of the existing landfill gas agreement, and they would have no further responsibility at the landfill. So that was kind of in thinking about the goals and what the preferences were as we moved forward here. It was, you know, when we were putting together this RFP, we really stressed the importance of maximizing the value of the landfill gas at the Short Mountain landfill, and then this preference to be complete, to transfer the landfill gas rights completely over to the bidder, and along with that, any interest in the landfill gas collection system, and ensure that there would be no additional responsibilities on Emerald's end. Now, that was the preferred option, but we did want to consider an alternative where the contract couldn't be assigned to the bidder. So that in this case, Emerald would remain party to the landfill gas agreement, but they would sell interest in the landfill collection system or landfill gas collection system and allow the purchaser, the bidder, to develop a landfill gas utilization project. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, so we working together, we put together a request for a proposal, and that really outlined the project background. It explained Emerald's history in the with the landfill. It explained the landfill gas flows, the expected landfill gas flows moving forward, the existing relationship with Lane County, and stressing those goals that I kind of outlined in the previous slide, where we have this preference to we want to maximize the landfill gas value at the landfill, but then and also ensure that Emerald can to stress the option for Emerald to be out of the contract, to have no further responsibility at the landfill, but then also include some flexibility there and encourage creative responses. If there was a bidder that had a competitive alternative approach to developing a project there, we didn't want to completely discount or disqualify some sort of creative or alternative approach to the project too. And we had some evaluation criteria in there, and at the bottom, you can see it there. They were evaluated based on the overall offer price, their project understanding and approach, and how their approach to developing the project and aligned with Emerald's goals. And we included a timeline in there, just so they knew what was going on, when responses were due, when questions were due, when interviews were going to be held, and when the planned and intent to award was going to be. So we sent the RFP to 22 companies. We received 5 responses, and in our opinion, just with our experience working in these RFP processes and being an advisor throughout these processes, we felt like 5 responses is a really positive result and a really good outcome from this. So that was really good, keeping in mind moving forward. We had some good options and lots of things to consider there. So Yeah, so we kind of talked about where we were at in the timeline, you know, interviews were held with each of the proposers. That allowed them to kind of walk through for each of their proposals and get to know the Emerald team, ask their questions, Emerald asked them questions, and kind of get a good feel on what their approach was going to be, what it was going to be like working with them, and allow them to kind of explain how, you know, their proposal was, or why they would be the best for the project, right? You can go to the next slide. Okay, so just kind of characterizing the responses that we got. I'm just going to talk a little bit high level here just so we can see what we got. So in general, each company, they have demonstrated experience in the RNG development space, and they have experience operating landfills, or they're planning to, so they have demonstrated experience, or they're planning to partner with somebody who is an experienced RNG developer. So as far as the ability for any of these companies to successfully carry out this RNG development project, there wasn't anybody who was really lacking there, right? So in each of the proposers, they had at least one scenario where where Emerald would be completely all out, right? So where the landfill gas rights would be fully reassigned and Emerald would have no further responsibility at Short Mountain. So that was good to see, you know, that everybody had at least that one scenario that really aligned with Emerald's preferred outcome there. And then as far as the structure, all the proposals were pretty structured fairly similarly, just some minor differences, right? And they'd have different experience in the RNG space. There's some that more specialize in landfill gas projects. There are some that have a wide portfolio or a wide variety of RNG projects where maybe they have dairy and swine projects and not just landfill gas. And they kind of differed in their approach to operating the landfill. You know, are they going to have their own staff operate and maintain the landfill? Is it going to be, or they're working with a third party who would be responsible for maintaining and operating and funding any sort of expansion projects at the landfill? The price, and obviously there were differences in the price proposal, right? So I'm going to get into kind of explaining the different structures that we saw there. But in general, we see lump sum upfront payment. That's one of them, revenue sharing option, and then some sort of base offer of $1 per MMBTU of landfill gas. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so as far as looking at the different proposals, and there's some pros and cons associated with each of those. So the lump sum offer would involve the bidder or the RNG developer offering a one-time upfront payment, and the benefit there is Emerald would receive immediate access to the payment. They would have no additional responsibilities of keeping up with, you know, annual payments or anything. But and compared to other price proposals or other types of structures, the total value is typically less than other common payment structures. And, you know, then we have revenue share, where the developer, they would upgrade the RNG, they would sell it, and then they would share a portion of the revenue that they earn from selling the RNG back with Emerald. So one of the benefit here is that when we're talking about different markets for RNG, you know, we have the fixed price market or the voluntary market, and then we have the RFS market, which, you know, placing RNG in the RFS market, it has a high earnings potential, right? It's a volatile market. It's subject to ups and downs. So when the market's doing good, the revenue share is really good. When the market is doing bad, then there's that opportunity for the value to be less, maybe compared to lump sum. And looking at a fixed price per MMBTU, so this would be the developer, they would pay Emerald a set dollar value per MMBTU of the biogas over the term of the project. And the benefit here is it's stable, it's predictable income, you're guaranteed a certain price over the life of the project. And although you don't get as much of an upside as you might if you were doing a revenue share where the RNG is being placed into a market and the revenue is being shared back with Emerald, you still have this stable, predictable income. And then you don't have the risk of, if the market is underperforming, then you're not losing out there. Okay, so and then kind of talking about the different markets available for RNG, there's really two primary markets, the RFS or the Renewable Fuel Standard and the voluntary or the fixed price market. So the Renewable Fuel Standard, just to give a high level overview, you know, it's a federal program. It has a goal to blend or reach 36 billion gallons of renewable fuel production and mixed into the fossil or the total transportation fuel pool in the United States. So within the RFS program, RNG is able to participate as if it's dispensed as a transportation fuel, and landfill gas RNG earns the highest value credit or RIN in the market. It's eligible to produce or to generate D3 RINs. So just something to consider with the RFS program. It is subject to volatility price. There are significant price swings throughout the life of the program, right? So kind of looking back at the revenue sharing option and some of the risk there is when in scenarios where the market is significantly overperforming, you get some really high revenue potential, but if it's underperforming, then you don't get that upside, you know, there's downside there. So just thinking about the RFS market right now, price is currently low. It's likely to stay low in the near term. Sorry about that.
What are you talking about?
So when we're talking about the voluntary market or the fixed price market, I'll show the RFS prices on the next slide too, so we can kind of talk about that. So outside of RNG being used as a transportation fuel, we have the voluntary market, which is made up of utilities that have procurement goals or targets of procuring RNG, or we have states that are starting to enact targets on for utilities to meet for procuring RNG. And then we also have companies that are voluntarily purchasing RNG to meet their own personal goals, right? And there's significant demand in the voluntary and the fixed price markets for RNG, and it's growing. So the idea in the voluntary market would be that the purchaser would pay a set dollar value per MMBTU over a fixed term length. And kind of looking at the differences against the RFS program, you don't get those significant upsides that you might get with the overperforming market or market that's performing really well, but you do get this stable, consistent income that's guaranteed over a set term length. So in general, most proposers are planning to approach the placement of RNG with a kind of a mixed approach where they send a portion of the RNG to the RFS program and they send a portion of it to the voluntary markets. So the reason behind that is so that they can still capitalize on the upside from the RFS program for when it's performing well. And but then if they kind of offset the risk there by ensuring a portion of the gas is just going to be getting the stable fixed income over the life of the project. So this is a really good approach. Just make sure that, you know, there's not going to be any significant risk, and it guarantees at least a base income for the landfill gas or the RNG that's produced. Next slide. Oh yeah, so this is just showing the volatility of the RFS market just to kind of further drive that home. So yeah, this is just the pricing over the past year. So you can see there's pretty significant price swings, especially recently. Prices have dropped pretty significantly as of November of last year. So this mixed approach of placing a portion in the voluntary market, you know, it ensures that you're not getting any of this downside from these low price swings. Okay, so just kind of summarizing and providing some conclusions here and next steps. So, you know, we sent the RFP out, we got 5 good responses. In general, if we want to characterize the price proposals, they're all within an expected range considering current market conditions. And I want to stress, you know, although the RFS market, it is underperforming, you know, there is significant demand in the voluntary and fixed price market. And these approaches of kind of mixing where the gas is going to go, sending a portion of it to the voluntary market and a portion to the RFS program really make sure that you're capitalizing on, you have the option to capitalize on those upsides and then get that guaranteed income from the fixed price market. And just moving forward as you know, Emerald works through these contract negotiations, moving forward, it'll be important to ensure, and this is something that has been discussed with the more favorable bidder, where there's this option of the final pricing structure balancing revenue risk and offering upside in cases of higher market performance or higher than expected gas flows, right? If the collection system is expanded or there's investments made in that, and to ensure that there's ability to capitalize on that and make sure you're getting the full value offered by the landfill gas in the RNG project. And yeah, Rob had mentioned it earlier, but there is one candidate that is preferred based on their price proposal and their overall approach and understanding of the project. And that, pending those, checking the references, the intent to award would be on February 11th. And that concludes kind of the summary of what this process looked like and what we were really looking at throughout the stages of this. So I'm open to any questions there, but I hope that gave a good overview of what's going on, the different pricing structures and the different markets that RNG can participate in.
The RFS program is federal. Is there a chance it could disappear?
That's a really good question. It would take an act of Congress to do that.
Theoretically,
I'm going to say it's not absolutely impossible, but I think it's very, very, very unlikely. There are people, both sides of the aisle benefit from this, right? Because it's not just RNG that can participate in the program. It's also, you have ethanol, right? In the at the ag lobbies and the ethanol, the corn farmers, right? They benefit from this program just as much as an RNG producer would, right? So there's benefit on both sides.
thank you.
So I think that's a great rundown. Thanks, Kylie. The big decision points obviously are going to be the structure when it comes down to negotiating a contract here. So we'll try to come in with a recommendation on our, preferred approach, but certainly it's a conversation for you all to have here in the days to come around, longer term risk in trying to maintain some footing in this whole arrangement, or
Collecting rent or
getting out
whatever.
altogether, right? We've talked about that being very appealing. I think what we found in this process is there is a lot more value in receiving some of that payment over time. And I think we can get ourselves out of it to a very large degree, to the point where there's no more operations out there for us. Hopefully we can not even hold the contract, but worst case scenario, that might be something that we need to maintain just to kind of keep this all moving forward. But I do think that the dollars are different enough that looking at some of those longer term scenarios, it's really worth a while in this case.
So the county might not let us transfer these?
Well, they have to sign off on any, if we were just to say, we're not gonna be party to this agreement any longer, we're gonna assign it to this party, they would have to agree to that. They could withhold that agreement, and in which case, we'll certainly go to the table and say, hey, look, let's make this happen. There's been a lot of back and forth here. I think there'll be a willing party to that negotiation, but worst case scenario, they say no. And we would be sort of the contract holders in name only, and we would try to assign off every other function to this new party that comes in.
But then they'll want to build their new facility there at Short Neck.
Well, we'll see. So one of the great segue here, she mentioned trying to prioritize taking advantage of potential upside. Pricing is certainly one aspect of that, but just higher gas flows. The proposer we've talked to has a lot of ideas on how to get the gas flows up to as high as 80 to 85%, which is, I would think, very attractive to the county if they're trying to work on their carbon goals. But that also means higher gas flows, and can we put ourselves in a position to benefit from that long term is really the question here. If we just take a lump sum and say we're done, we wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. So that's where, again, taking some type of a longer term payment stream here could make sense if we think there's gonna be extra gas flow. Let's just say that facility doesn't get built. That's a great example of how that could happen.
I have a question. At the conference, the resource power conference we were just at, who was it mentioned that there was, of course, we heard that what's gonna flourish here under the new administration is gonna be coal, gas, nuclear, oil,
Yep,
you know,
yep.
so far. And oh, and the one gal said there was like billions of gas that they have located. It was under an Indian, a tribal reservation somewhere, I think. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was like it was so much. I thought, well, if they get that on the market, what's that gonna do to the price of gas? It's gonna be like really cheap, I
Yeah, well,
would think. I don't know. I don't know
Natural gas
anything.
prices are already very low. That's
I
the
know,
thing
but-
that we got a balance here. So you're
Right.
getting natural gas being exported out of the country. That's
yeah.
something that's changed here recently. But RNG is really a special animal. So part of the revenue from this is the commodity gas, but a much bigger part, an outsized part, is the renewable attributes that go along with what we're doing out
Pollution
here.
abatement.
Yeah, so that is
RINs.
yeah, that is the
Yeah.
much bigger driver of the economics in this thing, as opposed to just the commodity gas.
Sure.
Which is
Likely
low
to
and
stay
likely to
around
stay.
long term regardless.
Yeah,
Just like pollution controls on cars, they aren't going away.
yeah, it's
Same
hard to
deal.
say.
The electricity analogy, Patty, is the brown. The brown power from a wind plant and the green power from that same wind plant, right?
Right.
It's the same analogy for renewable natural gas.
So we're gonna be doing this for 20 years with these guys?
That's
So that's the
the
other-
typical term we've talked about.
Yeah, that's the other contract mechanism that's in our current contract with Lane County. Kyle talked about the contract assignments and the other is the extension. So I think a lot of the bidders preferred at least 20 years, right? So that they can really recover their capital investment out there. And so we've got about 16, 17, 18 years left in the current deal, but we have a 10-year extension. That's available to us. So that's the other thing that we're gonna ask the county.
So is it
for.
possible to get a longer picture of price instead of just 1 year?
Yeah, so all of the proposals that we looked at and we shared with the board have been over a 20-year time horizon. So we do a price forecast and depending on what the structure was, it could be fixed for a portion of it, or it could be the variable, like, you know, a little increase every year or I remember what the assumptions
Some
were,
were
2%.
upfront. Yeah, some, they all vary, right? Some were all upfront. Some increased by a certain inflation rates. Some were based on performance of some kind of performance metric where if you got so much revenue, it would increase. There were a lot of different structures, but they were all compared against the same kind of contract life. And so, and then we tried to also compare them to the same amount of gas flows. So everybody had different ideas about how they would maximize gas flows out there and have different ideas about what their volumes were going to be, but we tried to pull all of that back to, well, this is what SCS thinks it's going to be, you know, folks that studied the gas flow impacts from the waste diversion project. And so we use that as kind of a standard baseline to say, like, our revenue expectations for Emerald compared to a certain amount of gas flow.
Seems pretty conservative.
Yeah, I mean, it helps, and we tried to do it independently of Eco as well, just, we really trust Eco, but we just wanted to make sure
Check your
that.
numbers.
Yeah,
I get it.
and they were pretty close to one another.
We like it too.
They all move the same direction.
Usually.
Yeah.
Well, it's always good to check your work with somebody independently measuring.
That's a lot of the value here of bringing them in addition to kind of helping with the RFP. Yeah, so I do feel like we're getting to a good place on this, that the bids were diverse. I mean, there was a good range of proposals,
Sure.
structures, prices, all that kind of stuff, but you know, we feel good about the outcome here and what this could mean for our customers. And I know there's a lot of discussion about this IMRF and whether this is gonna happen or not. To be very frank, we're gonna be waiting around for, you know, months, years to make them make a decision here. It really does feel like time to just do our own thing here and control our own destiny. So I think doing that, but giving us some ability to take advantage of upside if that facility doesn't get built is really the way to go here. We'll see where that goes. We are actively working on the replacement power question as well with our account executive. Bonneville's the deliberating on it. I think I mentioned that the news was not real bright last week, but that's possibly changed over the weekend. I don't know. It's like day to day. So apparently Rob's presentation last week, somebody in the audience saw it and got back to PPA. And so now they're rethinking how that might work. So we'll see. Yeah.
Good job.
You don't know. Oh, Rob. Sure.
Right.
Right on.
You never know who's sitting in the audience.
Yeah,
Makes sense
yeah,
to me.
You gotta take what you get, bro.
We've avoided them giving out tier one for
Yeah,
40 years. or
Yeah,
35
and that's been
years.
our-
So we
that's been
should
our
get that
justification.
Tier one back for the next 35 years.
Yeah,
And
I
then
agree.
we can jump it up.
um,
I mean,
the concern on their part is,
precedent.
are they gonna see a rush of these where everybody just says, we're gonna get rid of our resources? Our argument is, well, we've already made this decision, so it's gonna happen whether you like it or not. We're gonna shut this thing down. We're reflecting in our contract, or we'll
Checking
choose
the
not to.
numbers.
And we gave them our best shot, so it's still not I'd say high likelihood, but it's better than it was last week, so we'll see.
A lot of the planning that we did around that did not assume tier one replacement.
Right, we've been assuming
Yeah, I
basically.
know it would
tier
be
two.
a really, really good deal for our customers, but we're trying to focus on the tier two, the market indexed replacement power, yes.
The way that breaks down is we'll essentially take a resource that's generating at pretty close to a tier two price right now. We'll buy the replacement energy at something pretty equivalent. And then the R&D revenue is on top. So that's where this gets to be a good deal for our customers and potentially of use to some of those other initiatives we talked about over the summer. So
I had a question on the, our baseline of continuing what we're doing. That was
the status quo, yeah.
status quo. Did that, include like the replacement, the engine rebuilds in the next 5 years? Did that,
Yeah.
it
so we have
wasn't
a-
just doing nothing till they.
Yeah, Rob loaded it up pretty good. Well, I mean, it's reality. We're gonna have to rebuild every one of these engines.
Yeah.
We had
They're old.
Yeah, Jason Rice, facility supervisor, has a kind of a major maintenance schedule, kind of a 5-year major maintenance or 4-year, one for each engine.
Yeah.
And so we took in, that data was from, I think, 2022 or 23. And so we just took those numbers and applied an inflation rate materials over through the rest of the life. And it's not something you have to do every year, right? You have to, it's like you do it for a 4-year cycle, then you probably take 4 years off. And I mean, it assumes a lot, like I think that there could be, engines are very old. And so it assumes that there is no like catastrophic failure out there. We don't have a parts book for that, right? So it is, but it is, a lot of that stuff is loaded in there for major.
And that was the crux of our argument to BPA is what we're looking at doing is investing a lot more money out there for a lot less gas. Those two things don't work economically, so.
They asked us to reconfirm some of that stuff a week and a half ago. And I'd kind of forgotten some of those numbers that we put in that letter over the fall, but it was about $95 megawatt hour, right, over that through 2042. So that's the comparison that we're looking at.
That assumes that's what we know today about diversion and whatnot.
Diversion, maintenance.
So the math right to me.
Well, I think we're getting to a better place here. So we'll keep you informed. Once we do the intent to award, we can talk a little more openly about the successful proposer. We'll get into contract negotiations and make sure the board has, every say in the big points of that.
We also talked about maybe a workshop.
Yeah.
That's what I was
I
just
think we'll
gonna
try to,
suggest.
maybe we can get the winning proposer in here either at the March workshop, it's supposed to be about a month from now. Have them come in.
Yeah, ironically, this ended up saving the environment better than the county's plan, right?
It'll be an interesting contrast if theirs falls apart and ours moves forward here. Almost like we should have been working together from the beginning.
What a
Imagine that.
concept.
What an odd concept.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, don't divorce us in a text.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, if you have please reach out if you have other questions and we'll keep you posted.
Any questions, Charles?
No, I think, yeah, but they're not gonna get answered today. I think once we do the intent to award, the shape of this is gonna start to appear for us, particularly as we get into contract negotiations. I think there's a lot of room for movement in the relationship with the county here. And it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
We'll have to get our strategy together, but I think we're going in with some pretty basic asks, you know. If you'll do the assignment, great, but if you don't want to do that, at least do this 10-year extension that's already called for in the contract. Shouldn't be a big lift for them, so we'll see. Anything
Yeah,
else that
I think the county has already indicated to us that they want to help us. They clearly recognize that they've caused harm, and I think they want to mitigate that. And I'm hoping that they'll keep their word.
Yep.
They should,
Totally agree.
they should.
Okay, anything else to add, Kylie? Sean?
No, I think that's it for me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
guys
being
for
here.
being here. Thanks for all the work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Staying on the track here.
On issuance.
Okay. We'll have our second set of presenters here. Up, Sarah. So another major issue that's been taking a lot of our time here is financing for our long-term capital budget. And also securing this line of credit, which we actually have some really good news on, I shared for last week. We can provide some more detail. So I'll let Sarah, if you wanna, you have anything? I'm just gonna let them go forward.
Actually, we've got Scott Pepper and Stacy Kamasaki online, and Scott has prepared a presentation for us. Thankfully, I know, it gives us a break. So I think we'll let Scott take over. He was gonna share his screen. So
Are you able to do that, or do
the
we need to give you
presentation.
permission, Scott?
I think I can do it. I think I just need to have you stop sharing what you're sharing currently.
Very good.
All right, let me try now. Hey. Are you able to see the presentation? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, Scott Bauer, Northwest Municipal Advisors. I'll take you through a couple of slides, and Stacy will be joining me in on a couple of these items as well. First, wanted to show you, let's see, it's not advancing here. Oops. There we go. So first, just a quick look at the bond market. I guess we could probably show you a lot of different slides of market interest rates and whatnot, but we just want to show you this one just to give you a general sense of interest rate trends. So both charts are showing you the same data, just one is zoomed into the past 3 years, one takes us all the way back to 1990. And this is a revenue bond index, so it looks at a long-term bond, kind of a basket of revenue bonds, and just sort of where those interest rates have trended. So you can see generally from the 1990s, interest rates have trended downward. Of course, here, the historical low point are the pandemic years, so 2020 and 2021. Of course, once we got through those, inflation started to increase, and with that, that generally pushes bond yields higher. So that's exactly what we witnessed through late 2022 into 2023. Finally, as inflation started to stabilize, the rates, long-term rates, stopped going up and really have sort of bounced up and down over the past couple of years. But from a historical perspective, rates are still fairly low. But this year, we all are watching what's going to be happening on tax reform. Periodically, there's discussions on whether a tax exemption will go away. You know, that's one of the benefits as a governmental entity, that you're able to issue tax exempt bonds, which provide low cost financing for you. So again, everybody is watching whether that will continue on or somehow be changed. Also, changes in the federal funds rate, you know, as the Fed decreases their rate, that tends to signal that inflation is getting more under control, which is helpful for long-term bond rates. A little status update on the two financings that we are currently working on. So the line of credit, we sent out a request for proposal to multiple banks. We received back 2 responses from banks. One of the responses that we did receive back didn't meet one of our specifications. It came back and said that it would be on parity lien with your outstanding debt. We asked for the line of credit to be junior in lien to your existing 2013, 2021 bond and this upcoming 2025 bond that we'll talk about in a moment. So again, that one response did not meet that. The response that did come back was junior in lien, but it also was a very good response. So that it does provide you with the $8 million line of credit that you're looking for. The bank is charging a $15,000 upfront fee for that. There's no what's called an unused commitment fee. So sometimes banks, if they provide you a line of credit, not only would they charge you for what you use, but they would charge you a periodic fee for what you don't use. But in this case, there is no unused commitment fee. So again, the upfront fee that you'll pay to the bank will be the only fee that you will pay to the bank unless you draw on the line. And finally, initially we asked for the term to be a 1-year commitment. The bank actually responded with an 18-month commitment. And then after discussion with your staff, we went back and requested a 2-year term, and they agreed to that. So Stacy at Foster Garvey has already put together a bond resolution. You've already passed the bond ordinance at the last meeting. And again, this will be the bond resolution that'll specify all the final terms that is planned for action at your February 18th meeting. Turning to your long-term bond, so the $35 million long-term financing. We really got the process underway in the November-December timeframe. In December, we sent out a request for qualifications to underwriting firms. We received back 6 responses. The responses really were, as I say here, I mean, and I think was also in the staff report, high quality. I mean, you really received some responses from some marquee names and from bankers that have a lot of experience. So I think we were all very pleased by the responses, and it's probably put us in a position where we're not going to really go wrong with whichever underwriting firm we ultimately select. So just last week, we actually held interviews with the banks. So we wanted to give the banks an opportunity to answer a couple of particular questions, but then also to give all of us and Kyle and Sarah an opportunity to see some of the bankers, some of the other staff at those firms of who would be working on this transaction. And the goal is to have a selection by the end of the week. So we would again select the underwriting firm, and they would be then part of the financing team for the rest of our process through this financing. And ultimately, we would then end up selling the bonds via that firm to their investors. So in addition to the underwriter selection, there is we're doing documentation, and so that's largely Stacy and her firm with the help of your staff. And I'm going to turn to the official statement slide and let Stacy talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Scott. Again, good to see you guys. Stacy Yamasaki from Foster Garvey, the district's bond counsel. And again, like your line of credit, there will be a non-emergency ordinance coming before the board to authorize issuance of the bonds. After the 30-day referral period, there will be a bond resolution that will lay out some of the terms of the bonds that won't change, and then some parameters with which the final terms of the bonds would have to fit into. So we're working on those two documents as well as an official statement. So the last time the district did an official statement was in 2013. And official statements are prepared for public offerings of any municipal securities. And it will contain information regarding the terms of the proposed securities, information about the district, financial information about the district, historical financial information about the district, and also about kind of the general area in which the district is located. There is a preliminary official statement that has kind of placeholders for some of the things that you kind of currently see on the screen there. And it will be a preliminary principal amount, preliminary maturity dates and amounts. And then that is used by the underwriter to market the bonds to their investors. And then there will be a sale date, and at that sale date, final terms, so final principal amount, final maturities, and interest rates will be determined at that time, and that will be put into a final official statement. So this official statement is the district's document, although typically prepared by bond counsel. So as mentioned, we're working on that now with Kyle, Sarah, and the rest of your staff's help. It's carefully reviewed by everybody, including different departments at the district, to make sure that anything we have on employees is correct. Anything we have on, if there's pension information, that's correct. IT department might help with the cybersecurity information that's now included. And again, things are different in the bond market with the district since 2013. So what we might have used in 2013 is not kind of what we use now. There's a lot more information, as I think Sarah and Kyle can both attest to, that they've had to kind of help us get information on. And again, cybersecurity is one of those. Natural disasters and how the district's handling that, any wildfire mitigation plans, things like that, things that potentially investors want to know will need to be included in here. And that's both positive and negative information. Kind of the rule of thumb is that it's material information necessary for investors to evaluate the security. Are there any questions regarding this official statement?
I will fess up, for the materials at the last board meeting, I called it an offering statement, the same. I just used the wrong word, the official statement. So just in case you were going back and reviewing materials and thought there were two different documents, there are not.
It's a lot about us. It's worth a read as long as it may be. Once we get it done, we'll make sure that you get a copy. It's really
Gonna
pretty
be a
interesting.
lot. It's gonna really.
They wanna
help
know
us-
everything, don't they?
It'll help us tell our story.
Well, it's
Oh my
that's more
stars.
generally over the last week going through this underwriter process has been
Yes.
interesting. It feels like a whole body scan as everyone going through and just revealing ourselves to the world, all the good, bad, and the ugly.
The Dow.
Well, yeah, the feedback's actually been pretty positive. I mean, it's been great. They all see that, yeah, we got knocked down by the storm. We had some power market stuff, but in general, you managed through it. You still were able to keep your cash position relatively healthy. There's a good story to tell there. And so a lot of what we're looking for from the underwriters, who can tell that story the best to these investors.
Quite often, how you manage problems is more
Yeah.
indicative to how we do things than if everything was going well.
Yeah, a lot of them were spinning it that way. It's actually a positive thing to
Positive
show.
loaning your money down. I think that was a big piece of
Yeah.
information I wanna know.
Yeah, well, and so we'll go through the rating.
Crisis management.
The next step when we have the
Yeah.
statement is we'll go through and getting a rating, credit rating upgrade or update. And they'll want to interview us, and so they're interested in hearing, well, how did you manage through that, and what would you do if something like that happened again? And that's just part of the process of instilling some confidence. Yeah, Kurt.
I had a question, I'm not sure right this now, but so when you did, analysis to borrow money to get the 35 million, what we have to use to put in capital stuff is
Yeah.
what we have left after we pay fees and interest.
Right.
I mean, it won't be 35 million we can spend out there, it will be something less than that. So it looks to me like we ended up paying around 4%. I mean,
For the rate, yeah.
something like that, plus whatever fees, is that kind of the range that you guys were looking at? That,
Yeah, I think when we were doing our high level analysis, we were using 5%-ish, 4 or 5% interest rate.
Something in there.
I think it was 5, and kind of have to round up a little bit for some of the other fees that go into
And
it.
we were trying to be kind of conservative.
Yeah, I just want-
For
I
that
mean-
service, but
Yeah, we weren't assuming, 2021 rates like we got previously.
Right,
It was more today's.
my other thing
Well, that's
is,
good.
and it doesn't really relate to that, but, so FEMA, you're saying FEMA won't pay us for the interest we could have spent if we borrowed the money to pay for our storm. Now we're gonna spend $15,000
Yeah,
for a line of credit. Would we have, without the storm, would we have needed to get this line of credit?
yeah, I think you can make a case that maybe not.
and
Well,
I have
that's-
posed that question out there with our FEMA, our PDMG program delivery manager. I posed it as a hypothetical question and he wants documents and, like as if it's already happened. So we'll have to keep crossing that bridge in hopes that we can potentially recoup upfront
It's a
costs.
good question.
But we don't know the answer to that question
But-
going into this.
I went, well, in my mind, that we're gonna get this line of credit, even in our writings, it's because of the stress on
Yeah.
our finances because of the storm.
Yeah,
So that's that's not a what if to me, that's a
there's a straight line.
hard
Yeah,
number there
yeah,
that we should get 12,000 of that back.
yeah.
We're gonna try,
But
We'll do everything we can.
we're gonna try, Kurt.
Good way to ask.
It's a great point.
Right now, we're just hoping.
so
to get
it
any-
doesn't relate to their presentation.
No, it's a great point.
Let's
We
hope it
did get
doesn't
some
get
feedback, I think I might have shared about having that liquidity available is really for our bond rating.
Right.
Yeah.
And it may be something we want to consider just ongoing as a
We
tool.
talked about doing this a few years ago.
Yeah.
Pretty
We did.
similar.
We weren't sure there was a cost effective way to do it, but at least this bank has been really good to work with.
So it's maybe why you asked for maybe the 2-year.
Yeah, that was part of it. I mean,
In our conversation at the last board meeting, there's going to be some.
there was no cost to it, so,
It worked a little, you have to renew it a year.
Right.
yeah,
One less of.
there are
straight
fixed
tax to
upfront
deal
costs to
with.
taking these things
Why
out, so,
not?
yeah.
You
Staff
asked,
time alone.
Yeah.
you asked a while ago, and I can't remember if they got back to, can we get our interest from FEMA?
And so the interest potentially, if we can link it directly back to the storm, could be reimbursable.
What we can't get, we found, is if we used our own cash, the opportunity cost of that. Or, what would we have used, could we have gotten income from that cash?
Right.
And the lost
We
income,
lost
we
out on
can't.
the interest.
Yeah, because it
That
was all
cash
money.
would have been
And
sitting
that
on
was
the
so
bank.
But a line of credit, you can go after the
Yeah,
interest.
there's kind of a perverse incentive to go out and borrow money.
Yeah.
15,000.
That's what we don't know about, and that I have posed that question to our FEMA contact. Seems to be a.
They're
kind of a-
scrambling right now.
Yeah,
They're all
a
scared.
hole of unknown.
That did come up on our calls too, is like a couple of the more, I'd say astute underwriters said, you may want to consider, what if FEMA doesn't happen? Is there a financing scenario you want to consider there in its place? So they brought, well, I mean, it's not unreasonable to think that it could be pulled back. We hope that it happens. We're gonna work as hard as we can to make it happen, but
Sure.
what if?
Even if we weren't in current times.
Yeah.
We would be thinking about the what if.
Sure.
That's just the
It's
way
always
that we
been,
plan.
it's always been challenging.
So there were some creative ideas around, like they call it extraordinary redemption, where you could borrow money and then if you get a big inflow like FEMA, you could pay it back early. So there were some of those options out there that were interesting. I don't know at the end of the day if they're gonna be cost effective or not, but the underwriters at least are picking up on it. There could be some other tools to use.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'll put my hand down.
Go ahead. Chuck.
I didn't see a interest rate associated with the line of credit if we utilize it.
Oh, good question, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be at a variable rate. It's gonna be tied to prime. And prime is currently at 7.5%. The resulting interest rate based on prime at 7.5% would be 5.22%.
Okay, so it's prime minus 1.4 or something.
Well, it's a bit more complicated of a formula. But if prime, for instance, goes down 1%, then the resulting rate would be, I think, 4.44%, just as an
Okay.
example.
Okay. All right, thanks.
They did give us the choice of whether to do a variable or a fixed rate, and it felt like, what appears to be a declining rate environment, it might be better to do variable, but it's anybody's guess. So it wasn't a big cost difference up front.
Zero cost difference up front. So if the board feels strongly the other way.
Yeah, you could get a fixed rate at 5.2%, and so that would be fixed for the 2 years. Otherwise, again, it's the variable that'll be tied to prime.
Then that interest rate formula will be included in the resolution that comes before you all on February 18th.
Working on that right now, so we'll have that together for you in plenty of time for the ahead of time for packet materials.
I think what we'll also do is maybe put some, it's not an official resolution or anything, but the parameters around when we would access this line. We've talked about that a little bit. I don't think we want it to be free reign or we just tap into it willy-nilly. And so that's something we'll think about on the staff side is maybe just what scenario would need to happen before we brought this in front of you. Hopefully we would have time to bring it in here and get it approved. But there could be scenarios too where we're in a pinch and we need to use it. So we try to outline those ahead of time. But the goal is not to use it. That was the whole point really, was to show some liquidity. If there's another emergency, another big storm or something that happens, we would have this available. But our current plans don't call for having to tap into this thing. It's just there if something happens.
Gotta have the go bag ready.
That's right.
That's right. Right,
Would
should
you like
we
me to
turn
proceed?
the
Yeah,
dots
go
and
ahead.
keep moving?
Okay. Just a couple more slides here. So this next one is just showing you your outstanding senior lien debt. So you have your 2013 bonds shown down here. These are the principal and interest payments. These are what the bars are. So you have just 2 more years left on your 2013 bonds. Here's your 2021 bond. Almost $32 million outstanding, an excellent interest rate at 2.06%. There is a tender, so there is an option for the bank to have you pay this back, I think in the 2036 timeframe. We are showing it as if it doesn't get tendered. I guess the thinking is if the bank does make you pay this off, then essentially we would head back out and either through a bank loan or through other financing, refinance that large bullet payment out to some payment structure that makes sense for you. When we are doing new bonds like we are, it is a good time to see if there are refinancing opportunities. So your 2013 bonds, typically when public issued bonds are sold, they carry a 10-year call date, meaning we can't pay off bondholders for those first 10 years. But once the call date is reached, we're able to pay off bondholders at the district's option at any time on or after that date. Because the remaining payments are so short and the interest rate is relatively low, again, given as little time that's left on here, it's not appearing that there's any savings from refinancing these bonds. It's something that we'll continue to monitor as we go through the financing process. But if current rates were to stay and there's no other reason to take out these bonds, then this debt's likely to stay as is and just go through maturity. But I did want to show you again the outstanding debt of the district, because on the next slide here, I just wanted to show a couple of different ways of structuring your new debt. So there's a lot of different ways to structure debt, but what I wanted to show you is just 2 very common ways of doing it. But again, as we go through this process with your staff, we can do various different structuring options. But this does show you a level and wrapped scenario. So level is this scenario here where if we just took out the blue and red bars and just looked at the green, you would see that it was basically equal payments each and every year. Another option is to wrap the debt service around your existing debt. So that leads to kind of a aggregate level payment structure. So again, we'll work with your staff on what the best way to go. I guess we're also being cognizant that in a couple of years there could be additional debt that's added on top of what you see here. So again, we'll talk that over and see what works best for you folks. And finally, there was a question about the bond sale. So bond sale and bond pricing, I tend to use those terms interchangeably. Really, it's the date on which all the terms will be locked in. So that's the interest rates, the yields, the call provisions. We'll know the maturity amounts. And again, that'll be on the sale date, which, right now by the schedule, we're showing happening in mid-April. So until that time, things are variable. Interest rates will fluctuate between now and then. But yeah, so what does happen before? Well, I'm sorry, that sub point after the first point. Because regardless of what does happen on the sale date, it does need to comply with those bond resolution parameters that will come before you again by the schedule in the May time or March timeframe. But between now and then, what happens? So once we do get an underwriter selected, we can request from them, anytime a pricing scale. So that would be, again, interest rates and yields based on the current market. And that way we can provide estimates on the cost of capital. We can provide those scenarios like we just saw on the previous page. And as we get closer and closer, we'll be able to really dial in to what the cost of capital is, and as we get to the day before a sale, really, we wouldn't expect much fluctuation in the interest rates. It's not unusual from the day before to the actual pricing day for the results to fluctuate just by a couple of basis points. So again, hundredths of a percent. But before the sale, we'll have what's called a pre-pricing call. The banker will be on there, the underwriter. So that's the actual person that it's kind of the person in the middle, working with the sales force and working with us on setting interest rates and getting sales orders from his sales team in order to, again, set those rates and yields. So we'll have that call ahead of time. We'll agree on what we want them to go out the next day with. And then on the day of the sale, early in the morning, then the underwriter opens up what's called an order period. So basically that says to the market that Emerald PUD's bonds are for sale, and please place your orders. They'll have, again, the coupons and yields that we're going out with, and then maturity by maturity, there'll be orders that will come in. And it could be that certain maturities have more than one order available. So for instance, if we were selling $1 million of a 2025 maturity, it could be we get $2 million or $3 million of orders. Now, of course, we're not going to then turn around and issue $3 million for that maturity, but it gives an opportunity potentially to lower the yields because, again, we have more orders than bonds available. Conversely, it could be that for certain maturities, we don't get an order, or we get only a partial maturity is ordered. And again, in that case, we'll work with the underwriter. There could be a yield adjustment in order to clear the market and sell the bond to an investor, or the underwriter could agree to basically utilize their capital and purchase the bonds. I guess between having actual orders for the bonds and the underwriter utilizing their capital, the goal is at the end of the day to have a complete order. We don't want you to walk away with having sold half of what you need and then needing to come back at some later point. So again, between adjusting rates if it needs to happen and the underwriter taking bonds into inventory if that needs to happen, again, the goal is to have all the bonds basically sold in a bond purchase contract signed by the end of the day. That shifts the risk to the underwriter. So if there's any fluctuations in the market. That's really their risk. And you would again have a complete sale by that day. We are sizing this deal to provide $35 million of net project proceeds. So that would be the deposit to your capital projects fund. Issuance expenses are then typically added on top of that to then for the complete financing. I think that is the end of my presentation, so I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
And Stacy, that was great.
Just mechanically, the day of, Scott, is there a way to watch what's going on or participate in that in some way? How does that work?
Oh yeah, great question. So yeah, most of the underwriters do have a mechanism for witnessing it, and yeah, you'll be able to see on a maturity by maturity level as orders come in. So yes, that can be set up, and either individually or it can be set up in a boardroom, so you all could witness the sale if you like. There's also potentially an opportunity to for potentially staff to witness the sale in person, but we can talk further about that as well.
We'll be there.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty momentous thing. We don't do this very often, so I do feel like we've got the right partners here. Scott and Stacy have been great to work with, spending a lot of time together over the last week and getting to know them. And I think the underwriter decision is going to really lead us to a good place too. We are down to, I think, 2 finalists that we're doing some reference checking on. We just had a call with Click Attack PUD up in Washington today. They've worked with one of them that's come highly recommended to us. And I think I talked to Idaho Falls as well, who worked with another one last week. And I think we're following a Grand PUD on the second one as well. So a lot of good Northwest experience. They've been through this before, and I think that any of them do a good job for us.
Yeah, really impressed with all of them.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you both, Scott and
Yes,
Stacy.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.
Those T's, not those I's.
I'm sorry.
Continuing on, customer service policy.
Okay. Ellie, you want to join me? Right, I've got the changes up on the screen I can show here too, so. Our customer service policy is due to be reviewed every 2 years. We actually did a review just last year, but Ellie likes to read it, I think, every day, every couple days, I don't know, not that often.
I try not to read it that often.
She goes through it and she finds things. So we found a few items that we're gonna propose for updating. I've got those if you wanna run through them, I can kind of give you the screen here if that works.
Absolutely.
See everything.
Yep. So some of what we changed is really just based on operational changes, technology changes, just kind of the way we keep developing how we're doing business here. So the first one you guys will see is we removed out on 6.3. Our policy talked about our final billings being due upon presentation. And that actually hasn't been a true statement for a little bit of time. And I think it just got overlooked, right? We're more than generous with our final billings to allow customers to have that 15 days. And we actually give them additional time after that with no fees. So we just took that out knowing that's not our expectations anymore with our customers. 6.6, this was just a reevaluation of, we've got language in here that talks about our ability to not take a cash payment from a customer if we so choose not to. The $150 minimum seemed very small in today's world, right? It's very unlikely that we would refuse a payment from a customer. Anyway, I don't think since I've been in this department, it's ever been done. I'm not sure.
That's so funny, because driving up here today, I was wondering, because I was reading about some of the different markets that have to work in cash. But what's the biggest cash payment we've ever taken at the window?
I don't know that I know the answer to that, but there are now federal forms that have to get filled out for customers making large cash payments.
Wow.
So they avoid that, so we don't probably get as many as we would.
Past.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that some of our customers they can't.
They can't use the Becky's
Use
if
the
you got your
bank.
Grovers.
I think there's a whole mix of people. It's not
I read
just grow, but it's a lot of customers choose to come here and pay for cash, right? They don't have cards, they don't have checking accounts anymore, that kind of traditional checking account is gone away from a lot of people actually. So we still take quite a bit of cash payments. And so we increased this to 500, just thinking that's a little bit more reasonable in today's world with the, size of what an electric bill. Our next section that we have on here, I believe, is 6.7. So this, we wanted to change the language here. So this really talked about our auto pay folks, and if you sign up for auto pay, it basically was stating that we would take you off of auto pay if you ever had a payment that did not go through, in essence. So we know how often our cards get compromised, expiration dates happen. So we didn't think that language was very fair to our customers, and we honestly don't want to take people off auto pay. It's one of our best methods, easiest way for us to process a payment is to have customers encouraged to be on auto pay. So we just kind of rewrote the language to be more flexible, so it didn't say we would for sure take you off auto pay. So that's kind of the gist of that. 7.2 here. This one talks about our disconnect process. So with our AMI metering, and we rarely are doing any field disconnects. We have not been doing door notices or any type of in-person notices at all.
It's really evolved, hasn't it?
Yeah, so we still do notify customers. I want to be clear by taking this out, right? We've kind of reworked what the language looks like here, but all customers get 2 written notifications before we disconnect them. So you get your monthly statement that tells you you're past due, and then we send out an additional DQ1 notice. So you're getting notifications, it's just not this. What was intended here was that kind of field disconnect before we actually went out and disconnected. So that's just changed with AMI. And then the last 2 really were referring to a disconnection fee. That was both in 8.5 and 9.8. And we technically don't have a disconnect fee in our rate schedule. So we removed that out because it is not a fee that we actually administer.
You can just flip the switch here now.
Yeah. We have a reconnection fee, but we don't have a fee to disconnect.
Sure.
So.
We don't rub salt in a wound.
Oh, sorry.
Now, reconnect me sounds better than disconnect.
Yes, it does. There's
I can't wait to pay that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I've dealt with, there's sewer disconnect fees and it's all kinds of, if you tear a building out, then you have to get all these,
Yeah,
you have to pay to
Yes.
abandon.
yes, yes.
So, but there's no use having it, we don't.
Yeah, it's just, a lot of these are just to match current practice. We're not
Right.
saying one thing and doing another.
Updating.
Correct.
Yeah.
No major changes, just kind of some of these updates in here that I thought were important.
Poured into the.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no other feedback, we'll bring it back for approval at the next meeting when we get it in there.
Good idea.
Thank you, thanks, Kelly.
Sorry, 2024.
Yeah.
Review.
Our last item here, so we did a lot of hiring last year, and we thought it might be nice to do a retrospective. How that went, and then maybe give you a little behind the scenes look at how we do hiring at Econ and some of the exciting improvements that Alicia and team have made here recently. I'm gonna turn it over to her.
Exactly what Kyle said, 2024 was kind of a unique year for us for a lot of reasons, but hiring, it stood out from what we normally would do. So we thought a good time to just give you an update on what that year looked like, but also walk you through our practices. So we're gonna start with how do we even come to the conclusion of how we're gonna hire and how we're gonna select people. So starting off, one of the first things that we're gonna be doing is posting the job, right? We work with our hiring managers to get the job description in a good place. Then we go out and we try to post it to as many places as we can to get to basically get it in front of people that are gonna be a good candidate for the job. It depends on the job as far as where we post it, but this can include NWPPA, APPA, governmentjobs.org. We always do our website, we always do our social media, so Facebook, Instagram, we're trying to get it out there in a variety of ways. There are some things that we will do specific to the job, so like GIS. There's a couple different GIS, women in GIS websites that we're able to post those positions out there. We have some, actually it's been a while, but on some of our IT jobs, we used to have a local IT job board that we would post on. So we do try to look for new and different ways of getting the job out in front of people who we think might be interested in it, who might be a good fit.
He's Rural Light, I think that's still being published.
We have not used
This
that specifically, but
Co-op world.
yeah, we have not done that. There's I'm trying to think off the top of my head if we have. Some of the things we have done, that's not on here. We have done Craigslist, depending on the positions.
Sure.
And what we used to do was register, right? We would do the local paper and there, we have found that doesn't really fit in with our model anymore. However, there are certain positions, linemen and tree trimmers do still perform well on a local newspaper. So certain positions like that, we will look at doing that, or on their job board. So we try to vary it based on the job and the people who are gonna be applying for those jobs, where are they gonna be? And we try to get in front of that.
Right.
Yeah, so those are some of the ways that we try to initially get the information out there. And then the process, this is just a really high level description of what we do, right? Get that job out there, and then we would start receiving the applications. The hiring manager or supervisor is really the one that gets the opportunity to look over all of those application packets and try to figure out who's going to be able to do that job based on what they put in that packet. HR plays a supporting role, but it's really up to there for the managers to get make those decisions. And what they're using is everything that's in that packet, which includes a resume, usually includes a cover letter. Sometimes we don't require that. And supplemental questions on that as well. What we mean by that is we will come up with specific questions that we want them to answer in their packet. So that could be things like if we're requiring a minimum of 2 years in a specific job role, we'll just ask that question. Rather than leave it open to chance that they may or may not reference it, we will just ask it. That is one of the ways that helps us quickly get to who meets the minimum qualifications for the job.
Clarify.
Yeah,
Really do.
exactly. Yeah. So that's a big lift. In years past, we used to get a lot more applications for certain roles. I mean, I know back when I got hired, there's CSR positions that you could get 300 applications for one job posting. We don't see that anymore, but we still do get very high volume for certain jobs and other jobs that are harder to get quality applicants.
Sure.
And we're not looking for quantity, we're looking for quality. But yeah, we still see a pretty good response for the jobs that we're posting out there. So, yeah. The second step, right, is we've looked at all the applications and we've narrowed it down. We think these are the top candidates. We want to learn a little bit more about them. We typically do a virtual interview. So we can narrow it down. The application process is still today, I would say, the hardest stage in the selection process, because all you have to go on is that paper and what they put in the packet, I should say. So when we narrow it down, sometimes that first round, there's still quite a few people, more than what we want to have sit down and spend days interviewing. So what we'll do is we'll do a virtual round where it's a shorter interview time period. It's easier to schedule. It's easier for them to attend because they're not having to leave work for the day or take the day off to come here, right? They can just jump online. And those shorter interviews, we usually do a deep dive into their technical background. What I mean by that is the technical skills to do that particular role. So what we're really trying to assess in that time period is, can they do the work specific to this role? And then that helps us get a better gauge of, okay, these ones could probably come in and hit the ground running, or could start working on the workload pretty quickly. Then we move into round two, right? So then we narrow it down even further and we get to in-person. And with in-person, that could take anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. Again, depending on the job and how many questions we want to cover. We will do a wide variety of topics on this particular interview, because at this point, we're not just assessing, can you do this job? We're trying to figure out if you're going to be a good fit for EPUD as a whole. So can you be good for this role, and can you be a good fit for EPUD? So we're asking all kinds of questions in this, and sometimes we do activities to actually have them demonstrate their skills and abilities, right? It's hard with interviews. You're just going off of what they're telling you. And we do things in the interviews like behavior-based questions where it's less likely for them to just tell you what you want to hear, right? We're making them call back to a specific memory or experience from their work history that will demonstrate what they can do. But then there are times where we'll just have them do an activity that we can see firsthand how they are doing. So for like alignment, for example, we'll have them literally go out to our, do a climbing activity out of those test poles for us. Be able to assess their skills and see how they're doing. Yeah, sometimes it's right in the interview, we'll give them some technical questions, some multiple choice, or how would you handle this? How would you fix this? And there's our right and wrong answers. Sometimes it just having them walk through it helps demonstrate their troubleshooting ability, how they would work through a problem. And it allows the committee to see a different side of it. One of the things I think is really interesting with the activities that we have them do, a lot of the times, like alignment is a great example. They'll do the interview here, right? Then they get up and they go out there and do the interview, and it's usually not the whole committee. It's just two separate people from the committee that will work with them in that time. Giving them the opportunity to walk away from this kind of setting and go do something that they're more comfortable with, like alignment. That's where I'm going to shine, right outside. Let me show you what I can do. Those are great opportunities because then they also get a chance to relax a little bit. This is, even though we try to make it as comfortable as possible, this is an intimidating environment to be in. So getting them out there and demonstrating their skills a lot of the times will help them relax. And then that gives us a chance to see a little bit more about who they are as a person and what they can do. Some great interactions there. And those have really proven to be helpful for a variety of reasons for us. Then after that, sometimes we need a third interview, and that could be just because we really want to make sure they understand what they're walking into. That could be because we really just need to learn a little bit more about a specific aspect of their abilities. So sometimes we do a round 3, and what that looks like can vary quite a bit. Sometimes it's a half a day. In fact, that's one we just did recently where we brought them in and we did a wide variety of activities. They got a chance to see the department where they would be working. They got a chance to meet some of the people. So again, it gives them a chance to see what EPUD's all about and what the job is. And then is again helpful. It's a good tool we use when needed, but not always necessary. Sometimes by the second interview, we know for sure. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have the same committee all the time regardless of who's applying, or does it vary greatly?
Great question. It varies every single time.
Was it kind of a random sort of thing then? Or?
No, we work with the hiring manager to figure out who should be on the committee. And so
how is the hiring manager? Is that you?
No, so the hiring managers who have whatever role that department is in the department.
Okay,
exactly. Yep. So
and is there a limited pool? Randomly, can anybody be on the committee from your role, or is it all senior staff? Or
nope, it could be any employee. So in fact, we try to find ways to give everybody an opportunity at some point or another to be on it because it's a great experience, right? We've all been on that side of the table. You don't get to be on this side. So we do open it up to anybody. Manager and HR will sit down and they'll spend some time trying to figure out who's going to be helpful in evaluating who can do the work, who's going to be helpful in evaluating who's going to be a good fit. Sometimes you can find one person who could do both. Sometimes you're going to pull somebody, like if we're doing an accounting position, we want somebody who that's either directly from the department or works for that department on a regular basis to help us assess these skills definitely line up with what we need.
Do you find that there's a certain number of people that's most efficient, not too few or too many people?
Yeah,
in the
that's a
group?
great question. Yeah, there is. We minimum of 5. That way, you know, that we have a way of breaking it. At virtual interviews, we might do as low as 3, just because
Right.
you're cranking them out. They're a lot faster.
Yeah.
But minimum of 5 for in-person interviews. And there is such a thing as too many.
No, I understand,
And
yeah.
for one thing we always take into consideration is the applicant's experience. And so although we might want to have 20 people sitting here and having a chance to weigh
Don't
in
go
on it,
away by
that's
intimidating.
intimidating to walk into. So we do try to be mindful of it. The biggest committees that we will have will be on line and tree positions. And that's because we have the manager, the supervisor, and the foreman. And that just ends up being a bigger group.
Does the committee then make the final decision, or does that get passed to the big guy here?
Technically, all hiring, terminations, all that kind of stuff technically falls to the GM. So what the committee's tasked with is coming to a recommendation on, this is who we think we should
And this is
hire.
why we think that.
Yep, and here's why, and then we go to the GM and with that information. Sometimes, if schedule allows, he'll just join us at the end of the day when we're talking through all of
Yeah,
that,
I get
so
it.
you can hear
Yeah.
how we're coming to that conclusion.
Get that.
And then for the most part, he'll support what the committee is recommending, but that sometimes he'll ask us to do a little bit of a deeper dive here, or have we thought about this? Just to ensure that we get a good selection,
I think
but
more recently, I've really wanted to meet every single one of the folks that were hired, so I tried to add
Oh, I
that step
would.
in.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
like last week, I wasn't able to be here, there's a recommendation to hire somebody, so we're gonna have that person back so I can meet them.
that's where that round 3
Yeah.
has been coming into play.
Or you got
sometimes.
2 good candidates, you gotta have a tiebreaker kind of a thing. I
Yeah,
can see that.
exactly.
I just like to talk about our, you know, our core values, what it means to work here, some of the history of this place, and make sure that they're buying in to
Oh, I
what we're
get it.
selling.
Yeah.
So in the past, I don't know if we still do this, was the hiring committee basically grade certain aspects?
Yeah, we'll get to that here in just a second. Yeah, actually, I think it's the next slide. A lot of what we covered is gonna, I think, be on the next slide, so
We've
great
done that when
question.
we interviewed board replacements.
Yeah. They're the scorings. Yeah.
So again, high level description, right? We go through this process, we keep narrowing it down to make sure that we've got it to a good candidate. And then assuming we get to a good place and we find the right one, then we go into, you know, the decision and the job offer stage of it. So, but let's do a little bit of a dive on that interview process. A lot of it we just covered, but I'll get to Dale's question here in a second too. So
Sorry.
oh, no, that's okay. Interviews are completed by the committee, like I mentioned, 5, sometimes as few as 3. And I don't think I answered this question for you, Brian, but we do try to get representation from multiple departments when we can. Like we talked about before, there's a balance. So when a line or a tree position opens up,
Yeah.
the committee's already big enough just with the foreman and the managers.
understand.
So that doesn't.
Truly,
happen
the
usually.
office people don't have a lot of insights into that. Those people
Yeah.
also have an interest in finding people they can work with
Yeah.
too. They
Yeah.
probably know they can smell a
The
rat, you know,
employees really
pardon the term.
kind of guard this place, like.
That's my point, you
Yeah.
know, they have to work with these people
Yeah.
directly and
Yeah.
flip side with the office workers, you know?
Yeah.
You gotta be around these people and stuff, you wanna make sure somebody you can operate, you know, productively with.
Yeah. And so that's why we do try to think, okay, what position might be working with this, even if they're from different departments, what roles work
Yeah.
together frequently with this particular position, and let's get somebody in who can help us evaluate how that's gonna go.
Could, I see veterans preference at the bottom, we've talked about this in the past, could you refresh us on exactly how that works?
Absolutely, and
We all
actually,
kind of know the idea of it, but how the
Yeah.
process works.
I think what I'll do, I'm gonna answer your question, because then it'll lead into, it'll,
Sure.
be a nice segue there. So the process that we do to ensure a fair selection process, we do a scoring model, a matrix basically. And what we do is prior to any interview, we determine what categories are we going to be using to make our final decision. And in that case, typically the type of categories you're gonna see are job knowledge and skills. Can they do this job? And then we get into categories that again relate to can they do this job, but also can they be a good HUD employee. Those are things like problem solving and adaptability, dependability and work management, communication, team and interpersonal, right? We do try to keep it to a 5 categories. Those are 5 categories that I listed, but we do try to keep it to a set number, because once we start getting 20 different factors, they start getting watered down, right? Those, the weighted percentage for each of
Sure, yeah,
those aren't as impactful. So usually job knowledge, can you do this job, pretty heavily weighted. But then those other categories that I'm talking about, those get to what you're gonna be like to work with. And those might not have as high of a weight as one category like job knowledge, but together those get to, can you be a good fit? And those make up a good chunk of that weighted evaluation process. And so what we do is those are predetermined, so we know this is how we're going to come to a conclusion. And then after the interview, what we do is every single one of the committee members has one of those sheets, and we have a description for each of them. So what do we mean when we say the term, dependability or interpersonal skills? We give them some examples, so we're all on the same page. And then what they do is they fill out their individual scores based on what they picked up on during the interview. And we go around and we collect all of those scores, just scores, nothing else, right? I want to see, is there a big difference between what you saw versus what you saw? So the initial take. And then it helps facilitate the conversation after that point. So if everybody's at a 7, great. Okay, so it sounds like we're all on the same page. We all kind of picked up on the same thing. You scored a 0, you scored a 10. Tell me what you saw that he didn't, or vice versa, right? So it helps facilitate that discussion. Then once, and we utilize that to make sure that we're looking at it from all seats on the campfire, right? We're seeing it from every angle. And sometimes what that can do is it can help somebody be like, I hadn't thought of that. I didn't pick up on that. And it helps them have a better assessment. It also can help when you have somebody with a really strong personality or opinion. They can sometimes dominate the conversation. So starting with just those scores, an initial take can be really helpful as well. And then from there, basically what we do is once we've had a good discussion, then as a group, we come to a final decision on what the score will be for that category.
I see.
And then each of those categories has a weighted value. So like I mentioned before, job skills will be a higher percentage. So,
Right.
and HR keeps track of all the scores and enters all of that information. So that's kind of how the scoring model works. Then let's move into that veterans preference discussion, right? So we are required to follow veterans preference. Simple way of describing veterans preference is that it is designed so any veteran that we have, if they meet minimum qualifications, they should receive preference at each stage of the interview process. So if we go back to that slide, right, every single one of these is a stage in the interview process. So what preference looks like in stage 1 is you meet the minimum qualifications, you get an interview. Plain and simple.
Okay.
So we have to be real clear what are minimum expectations. The other thing is those supplemental questionnaires I've mentioned, those help us get right to who in fact does need it. Instead of leaving it up to chance, here's what we absolutely need. Do you have it? Yes or no? That helps us get right to whether or not a veteran does or does not need those.
So the scoring aspect is not affected.
So that's for stage 1. Stage 1, right? Because at stage 1, you just have to basically give them a chance to get an interview.
Qualified candidates.
Yep, so they meet minimum, they get an interview. Every stage after that is when you can look at adding a percentage to their score. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you provided preference at each stage. The amount of preference is like if we're doing a scoring by percentage, it's 5% for a veteran, 10% for a disabled veteran. Their score would get bumped up by that percentage. So what we try to do is make sure that the interview committee does not know who a veteran is, right? We don't want that to alter the scores in any way. It is a little bit challenging because sometimes that comes up, they're referencing experience that is directly from the military, but we do our best to try and keep that information out. And then basically once we've scored the candidate, the HR side of it that nobody else can see is when that veteran's preference is then applied.
Okay.
Yeah. And the theory, or not theory, but the idea is that if you get to the end of the process and you have 2 candidates that are equal, the job would then go to the veteran. Yeah. So does that help answer the question of what you were looking for there?
And if you remember, this can get complicated. Bonneville many years ago had a big problem applying veterans preference and actually had their administrator walked out the door because they weren't doing this the right way. I think it involved scoring such that the veterans preference would not be enough to move them ahead like we should be. So we're very careful with this, and we've hired a lot of veterans recently. Actually, our workforce is pretty heavy on veterans, and actually just recently one of these job interviews resulted in us using the veterans preference and having it make a difference. So
Is the federal law, is that correct?
Correct. Yep. And just for clarification, we do veterans preference in every selection process.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just doesn't apply because we don't have any veterans.
Good, I mean, no, I get
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I get that.
exactly,
Okay.
so, but in addition, all that documentation and everything that we're creating, it helps us get to a decision, it helps facilitate discussion. It also is, we're required from a public record standpoint to retain information, so all of those pieces, it helps with all of that. And so if anybody asked, how did you get to this decision, we have a clear process, and I feel like it supports a fair process.
Again, we've dealt with this, when we picked a board member in an interim,
right.
Yeah.
Not quite as specifically as this, but it's the same, I remember
Yeah,
the
it's
process.
required there too.
Very
Yeah.
similar, we talked about all, the rating and all that.
Yeah. A couple things on this slide that I'll hit that we haven't really touched on is in regards to the committees, we've talked about employees being from different departments and getting a chance to be in here. What I think is really unique, it's not just, okay, you interview by committee and multiple people get to weigh in. It's the experience of getting to do this together, right? We have a say and we take it seriously and we want to select our peer.
Yeah.
And we want to find somebody who's going to be just as passionate about what we do and what they do. And so that piece of it is really cool because you
It
get
makes
to
the
directly
organization
contribute.
cohesive.
Yeah, absolutely. But the other piece of it that is so great is that they get to spend the day and collaborate with people that they might not always get the opportunity to. So you have somebody who's out, working in the field a lot of the most of the time, and somebody in the office, they don't get a chance to see each other. They get to spend the whole day here. We have lunch together, we're talking, you get to hear a little bit more about what they do and how they contribute. And I have found that it has really deepened appreciation and respect for one another. It just creates that kind of a good team building activity. I've had days where we've completed interviews and I've literally had people comment, that was one of the best days I've had in such a long time. It's just because it's just something different. And the thing that I like about it is when you're here, that's your one task for the day. This is my focus. This is what I'm gonna be doing. And it really allows you to just be in the moment. And so,
It seems to me there could be a real, in the wrong organization, there could be a real rift between the outside crews and the inside people. Totally different mindsets,
Yep.
stuff. You could easily have
It's
animosity.
a challenge at every utility.
Yeah, it's not
Different
unique.
definitely a rift. Different
Yeah.
kinds of people doing different jobs, and
Different-
it's keeping that group in one team is a tough game.
I think you're right there. I don't think that's unique to EPUD. That's
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean that, I meant the
Yeah.
utility
Yeah,
industry in general.
exactly.
But frankly, any business that have widely diverse kinds of work.
Misogynistic practices
I
that
like
still
that
go
word.
on. But you don't.
But you're right, it presents some challenges. This is just one of those great opportunities where you get everybody in the room. And through those conversations, through those lighthearted interactions, through that decision-making process, they're able to come to that, hey, we're on the same team. We're wanting the same things. You can find those things that do connect you. And it's just kind of it's a break from the normal day too.
No, I get it
So,
too.
Yeah.
And you
so-
feel like you have a part in the outcome, which is
Yeah.
important to
Exactly,
everybody who
you
works
are
somewhere.
contributing, yep.
Yeah.
So I think people take it seriously, they engage, they provide good feedback. Again, I mentioned in here, everybody participates, each person in that room will be asking a question at some point in that process. And what we strive to do is make it as comfortable as possible for the applicant. The more relaxed they are, the more we're gonna see the true version of them, of themselves. So we try to demonstrate, we make jokes, we laugh, we try and let them see, this
Sure.
is what it would be like working here, and
You know,
so.
scary, scary people.
Yes, exactly, so. Okay, let's see, so process improvements, that's kind of just high level description of what we're doing. As we mentioned in the cover letter, we have been making improvements on our hiring process. Most notably, I would say, is in the application process, that used to be completely paper driven. We were allowing people to email in their packets, but still everything was printed off, put in big old stacks of paper. You'd have a green folder, a yellow folder, and a red folder. The people who didn't make the cut went in the red, the people who might be babies were in the yellows, right? So, and it was a lot of paper. It was trying to make sure all that information was secure because it's confidential information. So you're trying to manage all of that. We moved to an electronic system, an application tracking system called HireBridge. It allows the applicant to submit their application online. It allows the hiring manager to review everything online, just streamline the process, made the process better for applicants as well. We launched that in 2022. Since then, we've posted 22 jobs since August of 2022. You've seen that. So we continue to find ways to improve the system and make it a better tool for us. But so far, it's been a big help. Like I said, it mentioned it makes it easier for the managers in reviewing all of those applications. And I'll give you a sample of what they would see when they're evaluating something here. For the HR side of it, way safer. I mentioned they used to be able to email attachments. I know Rob's gonna be happy that we're not just randomly clicking and opening different files from people that we don't know and clicking on stuff. That's not a great method anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, so safer in that way. The information is confidential, so we're able to retain it, we're able to protect it better. When we post the job in there, it blasts it out to multiple jobs for us, so we're not having to log into each of these job sites. Way better in that front. We can create electronic interview packets for committee members to review. We can use it as our way to communicate with the candidates. If they, let's say they don't move forward, they can generate an email and send it to all the people who didn't get an interview all at once, instead of what we used to do, which was type an email for each person. So way better than what we had. And then another benefit that we get from this is now we have recruitment data. So some of the information that we'll get from this will be like the amount of time it takes us to fill a position. It also will help us evaluate which communication channels, as far as like where we've been posting, which ones are effective. So not just in the matter of we got a bunch of applications from Facebook, but also how many of the positions that we hired, the people that we hired, where were they seeing the information? So it helps us know, keep posting here, maybe this isn't worth it anymore. So good information coming from that as well. And then as I mentioned before, we're always taking into consideration, what is that applicant going through? And so a better experience for them, a little bit easier. One of the things that we do that's a little bit unique, well, not unique, I should say, but more along the lines of keeping up with the times. You know, you used to spend all this time on your resume, you put all these details about what you did, and then they say, go apply for our position. Here's the application. Now walk through every single one of those jobs. That's on your resume, and repeat everything that you did at that job and the times and everything. All the information's right there on your resume, but you're required to fill it out again. We've eliminated that process, so you don't have to re-enter all of that information. Your resume is imported, and it kind of basically provides a summary for us. And then we supplement that with supplemental questions, right? So we get right to the point, just in case they didn't have something in their resume, we get that information, make sure that those questions will get us the information we need to make the, narrow it down to the next group of people. So.
And HireBridge does that for you?
HireBridge will.
Does that process?
Yeah, basically the whole application is done through HireBridge. They answer the questions through HireBridge, and it takes that resume and provides that summary for us. It also has the ability to block out names or certain information like that too from a
judgmental AI. I love it.
Yeah, that's one thing we have to be cautious of, right? Because sometimes that can backfire. And the system has a lot of capabilities, but right now we're just benefiting from the basic features, being able to have a more efficient process. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Somebody got a question? Okay. All right, so just a quick snapshot, I know it's kind of hard to see, so when the hiring manager is going on here, I blocked out information for it so you can't see anything specific, but the hiring manager can see on here, okay, this person applied, let's see, down here 27 days ago. They saw the advertisement on Facebook. It allows the manager to go in here and put a summary, a rating basically. Hey, this is a really good one, and a couple notes that help them when they're reviewing, you know, 60 some odd applications. What was special about that one? What stood out? That kind of stuff. So it's really helpful from these are blank right now from this is an old sample that I gave, but from the HR side of it, we have information on here. What stage or status is each applicant in? You can sort and filter by these. And yeah, again, just super quick and easy. So just a little snapshot of what that looks like. Oh, this is where I get scared and I'm gonna have you exit out, but
my website.
yeah, I'm gonna have you pull it up. So the website, we've also made some improvements and trying to provide good information about what job postings we have, but also resources for applicants. So we've had a career page for quite some time. Now with HireBridge, what happens is when we have a job posting, we'll have Christine in our communications department update it for us. And if there were a job posting, this is where you would see it. Right now, we don't have any jobs open, but we do want to provide an update. So if you apply for something, we don't want it just to disappear and that's it. You don't know what the status is. So we provide an update. Hey, for this particular position, it closed on this date. Here's the status and here's what you can expect. And so one of the things that we ensure that we do is we get back to every single applicant. We're not going to ghost you. We want to make sure everybody hears back. Even if it's not the news you want to hear, we're going to get back to you. So we want to make sure that they know that as well. So we're just putting it out there for them to know.
It's good to be polite, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of time and effort and
Sure.
it's a very vulnerable
Absolutely.
process. So we want to be
Absolutely.
respectful of that. And at the same time, you might not be a good fit for this particular position, but it doesn't mean that you might not be a good fit for something else down the road. So how we treat people today is really important for what we might be able to recruit down the road. So, the other thing that we have on here too is we talk a little bit about apply even if you don't meet the minimums. We still want to see your application. We do have a lot of, there's information out there that people will self-select out because they don't meet all of those specific requirements or things that we've listed on that job description. We say, don't worry about that. Go ahead, put it in there. Let us make that decision. Still, just give yourself a chance. Let us take a peek. So we do put some information on there. And then to help them and have a better application packet, we provide information on things that they could be doing. So this is information from a variety of sources, but if they were looking for how to make the best interview or application packet, we provide resources and information for a variety of things on here. Again, because the better their packet is that demonstrates what they can do, the better it's gonna be for us in making that selection process. So, yeah, now you go back.
That's good.
It was scary. Okay, so those are, yeah, I'm gonna say, so those are some of the improvements that we've made. Let's switch over to what 2024 was like. As I mentioned, it's been completely different type of year than what we would typically see. Historically, our turnover rate anywhere from 4.25 to 7.5, and that's usually from attrition, retirements, transitions from the workplace. Our typical hire ranges from 4 to 7% as well.
Or something.
Total, excuse me. 2024 turnover rate, 12.28. Hiring 12 hires in one. It's, but 12 doesn't sound like a lot, but for the size of our organization and historically what we would do, it was a big year. It was a really big
A lot of
year.
it came at once.
A lot of it was in a very short period of time. In fact,
A lot
I
of people
think,
looking for the restroom all at the same time.
I think if I remember right, I think it's 13 hires in 9 months. One of them just dipped into January, but it was over, I think, a 9-month period, if I remember right.
Roughly 80 people, correct?
Yeah.
We're at more like 85,
86.
86
85,
now,
that's right.
yeah, so. So here's just a quick snapshot of what things have looked like over the past 10 years, with the blue bar being the number of new hires that we've had and the green line representing our turnover rate. You can definitely see a pattern here, 2020, wonder what's going on there. Seems, if you remember, kind of an interesting year as well. But for the most part, those line up with, right, you're seeing so many people leave and we're replacing those many, or the same, pretty much the same number of people. But there are times where we've added positions, so you might see a little slight difference in here. But again, you look at 2024 and it just stands out in multiple ways.
It's like putting new light bulbs in your house. When you build it, they all burn out the same week.
Yeah.
Is there any,
Funny.
yeah, pattern on our demographics, like if everybody's older and
Yeah.
that's what happens with a good employer.
Yeah.
You retain people.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
And
We
then
probably have, I don't know if we rate now by retirement and how
We-
many retirements we've had.
I was wondering,
Yeah, so I can tell you right now, from 2019 on, we've had 14 retirements just in the last 5 years. So I do, when I track the turnover, I do break it down into certain categories. So I look at it from a couple different ways. I look at exempt versus non-exempt departures. I look at it from voluntary departures, retirements, and involuntary departures. And so I try to look at that data from multiple ways to see what we can learn from it.
Yeah, it's another way to figure out what you can do to retain people or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what will definitely, within this, it's not reflected in this graph, but retirements is a huge part of the turnover rate. That's what we see. We are having an aging workforce. So a lot of the people who've been here for a really long time are starting to retire. And we've been like just 14 positions in the last 5 years alone. We're bringing in new people. So the longevity, how long people have been here is starting to shift because of those retirements.
Yeah.
But we do still have quite a few people who've been here for a really long time. The fact that we have, what is it? What kind of tree is it out there? Dead tree. I guess like a birch tree grove out there with, I think it's 5 different trees for people who celebrated 35 years.
Wow, cool.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We just had our longest tenured employee ever retire, Doug Hoover, who worked at Short Mountain for 39 point, like,
He was 7 months short.
7 months short of 40 years, the guy quit on us. So he was due retirement.
Yeah, he gave her.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and when we're making these decisions, we're not necessarily saying you have to stay here to retirement, but we are wanting people who want to be a part of what we're building and what we're contributing to our long-term vision, excuse me. So I do think it is one of those things where, it's likely if we're making a good selection process that we'll continue to see people sticking around. So, okay, so those are some of the numbers. I wanted to call out how the ice storm impacted recruitment during 2024 hiring. In a couple different ways, there were some good things that happened, that some of the, openings that we had came from that event, and some of the recruitment success that we had came from that event as well. The one thing that I think really stood out was during that event, people took note of our response efforts, but also our communication, how we interacted with our communities. That really stood out. I've got a couple different screenshots, right? We have different social media posts. We're over here, you've got Kyle giving updates on what we're doing. Here's the status, here's your morning information, here's your evening information. And then in between the day, we're like, hey, here's who's restoring your power. Here's the group of linemen. Hey, here's the people taking your call. So we try to engage them and keep information flowing as much as we can. And people were engaged, and they were following us, and they were listening to us, and they appreciated the contributions we were making. Some of the people that we caught the attention of were future job applicants. And so when we're doing these interviews this year, we're hearing people, one of the questions sometimes we ask is, what interested you about this job? Or what made you apply at EPUD? And they're like, that storm, boy, watching what you did. And I was out of power. Sometimes I'm not even one of your customers, but I heard what you were doing. And being either really impressed and thinking like, hey, that looks like a pretty good employer. Or, hey, I want to contribute directly to it. I want to be a part of that. So it was really good experience in that regard on how it benefited our recruitment in that case.
We had tons of eyeballs on us, tens of thousands.
Just a comment. We almost lost a couple of our recruits from other crews come down and apply at their place.
Is that right?
Yeah, they were headhunted too.
Okay.
Hey, you need to work for us.
Well,
Come down here, talk to this guy.
glad we held on to them all. We pulled some from others, so yeah. They would try.
Sharks.
That's an old trick.
Let's try.
I don't think you started that one, Kyle.
No, we've carried the tradition on.
Yeah. So again, I think that ice storm ended up helping with our recruitment overall. I think we got a higher quality of applicant pools, a better new hires as a result of it. So wanted to call that out. Almost done here. I also just want to call out the impact on departments when we have a lot of hiring or turnover. Like I mentioned, 2024 was a standout year for a variety of things and really put EPUD to the test. And when you have departures, it impacts those departments, right? It impacts their short-term productivity. And those departments have to go without until we complete that selection process. And so, that can take a while, from the amount of time that you have to post a job, let it sit, go through the interviews, do all those steps we talked about, and all the while, these departments are operating potentially with one fewer or more employees, and so covering that workload can be quite the struggle. So they have to wait through that selection process. So then you think, okay, we got a new hire, somebody's here. Guess what? Day one, they're not able to immediately make an impact on that workload. There's an onboarding and there's a training process, and that can take anywhere from 6 to 12 months, depending on the position. Some positions even longer. But before they're really able to contribute and start making a dent in that workload, it takes time. The other thing to keep in mind is when we're doing on-the-job training, that can make an even bigger impact on productivity, because now you're pulling somebody out of the work to get somebody else up to speed on the work. So these departments are impacted pretty heavily. And like I mentioned, we had 12 hires. And so there's multiple departments in this last year that were in this position. And I just want to call out and how amazing it is that they were able to cover that workload. They rose to the challenge. They found a way to get through just even the normal workload that we would see on a year, but then especially in 2024 with everything that was thrown our way. So really commendable.
That's one of the reasons poorly managed companies are in such tough shape, because they've got employee turnover constantly. Your
Yeah.
productivity is
Hugely
non-existent.
disruptive.
Yeah.
That's why all the stuff that Alicia's doing, getting this hiring right is the number one thing we can do to keep this place
You know,
running well.
money and compensation is important to all of us, but just to have a pleasant place to be when you work
Yeah.
is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yep.
It really is. We spend most of our waking hours at work. If it's
Yeah.
miserable, you're not gonna stay.
It's
And
I
this-
don't want the hysterical people running through the hallways crying.
usually not a good sign.
Hi.
And the way we do it is this process is our first impression.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have to make a good first impression.
Exactly.
But we're also
Demand as
community
well as
members,
yours.
right? We
Yeah.
want them to see this is,
Yeah.
we're your neighbors, we're good community.
This isn't a snow job. We
members.
really are this nice.
Yeah, exactly. Last thing on here, just kind of want to talk about nurturing and promoting our EPA culture. Kyle hit on this just a little bit ago, right? Hiring, we consider one of the top priorities here. We got to get it right. There's so many things that are unique about EPA. We don't want to lose that. We want to nurture that. We also want to be talking about it so we can get future recruitment and success stories as well. And so when we are doing this, we really do put an emphasis on, is it a good fit? And we talk about this to the candidates. That doesn't mean just for us. It has to be a good fit on both sides. They have to be, it has to be a good fit for them as well. What we talk about in the interview committees, our job is not there to pick the best candidate. Our job is to pick the right person for the role. And so we're not just looking at, okay, this one has scored the best. At the end of the day, is this the right person for the role? And if it's not, okay, then maybe we need to talk about throwing the net back out there or taking a different approach. So we're willing to make those difficult decisions to ensure we get the right candidate. We talk about our core values, make sure they understand what is a priority for us, what we want to be doing here on a daily basis, and we want to make sure they understand it, they're on board with it, and it aligns with their values as well. And then the last thing I guess I would say, is when we're doing all of this, it's just one additional way for us to get out there and show people who we are. We've had in our strategic planning, we've talked about being a customer partner, we've talked about being an employer of choice, we've talked about contributing to our communities. Through all of these processes, we're able to do that, sometimes in a one-on-one, and you get the interview and you get to see who we are. Sometimes it's with these getting these posts out there, doing these social media activities, but we're getting a chance to tell our story a little bit more and tell people who we are and why we're unique and that you should come work for us. So this year's been interesting, definitely has set us up for future hiring, and I think it's helped us make some improvements, and we'll continue to make improvements as we go.
Yeah, hugely excited about the people we did bring into the crop of
Great selection.
the pools that we had, the amount of interest out there. We really got the cream of the crop when it came to being able to select new employees here.
Cool.
Yay, team.
Maybe glad to hear that, I'm sure.
Okay, all right,
That's
thank you so
right.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I could say one thing. Great presentation. I'm just so glad that when they recruit and interview board members, you don't have to climb a pole.
We could add that to the process.
We think every position go out and climb a pole just for fun. Yeah.
But I'd like to say from the manager's team here, Alicia has knocked it out of the park.
complete game changer.
Right.
How all these things that she's done, I've been on tons of these interviews over the years and massive amounts of them in this last few years. Probably a reflection of the manager of that department, losing that many people. That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But she's done a wonderful job, and what you see there is just, it's spot on. It actually ends up really working very well. I think
Welcome to
less
the new
people.
age, huh?
Yeah, it's just really good. She does a great job.
Good deal.
That's right.
Okay, good. Is there any public comment?
I have one last item, I'm sorry, it does relate to some hiring, so we have a job that we're trying to post for, and it was originally envisioned as a temporary employee. The job that we had a temporary person and it didn't work out. We're having a hard time determining how we could make that work, with the application process. There's just not a lot of demand for temporary jobs out there, so I am proposing to move that to a permanent hire, and it would mean a headcount add this year potentially. We have the dollars in the budget. We've planned it as if it would be part of the budget this year. We just didn't plan the headcount. So if everything works out the way that it's supposed to, that could be a headcount add. We would be able to adjust for that in later years, so that we're not changing our long-term trajectory. But I did want you to know that could be potential for a one higher headcount at the end of this year.
You feel like there's enough work for that person to do full time?
I really do, yeah. I mean, it's Rob doing it right now. He's doing junior level work when he should be focused on bigger stuff. And
Things like security.
what's that?
Who's working on it?
Nobody.
No, so we're going without, this was the prior person we had in that job.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Part-time.
So Rob is having to fill in for this, and it's not a great setup. We can try to do it with a temp, it's just, we're not getting a lot of good interest in that type of setup, so. I'm gonna propose we do it as a regular hire, and again, we can adjust some other hiring down the road to make up for that. I don't think it changes our long-term trajectory on headcount. Won't affect the budget in terms of dollars, it's already been planned that way, it's a difference in.
Rob's
Well,
over.
maybe, at least
No more Saturdays.
He should be salaried.
keep his mental health in
He's
a
not
better
paid
place.
for it.
Yeah, makes it hard to implement our kind of long-term visions and goals too.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking much different.
IT is just a huge need.
Hello,
across-
can you hear me?
Oh, hey, Ron.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, good. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did.
Alright.
Several comments. One is I was really impressed with what you guys did as far as, picking up the ball when it was fumbled from the county and
Yeah.
doing what we can with what we've done there. I think what we need to do essentially is for the public's good, we need to lay down, what we've done over the years. And it was a great example because all over the country, there's problems with methane. And, we did an amazing thing, and it didn't cost the public that much, if anything. In fact, it benefited the public and it benefited the county. And the county then turned around and did something, and they haven't come through with their new project yet, have they?
No, it sounds like it didn't go very well this afternoon when they were talking about it, so
Yes.
it's not happening anytime soon.
Yeah, so I think the public need to be aware of what went down and how it's going to cost not only the environment but also the public. We're talking millions and millions of dollars probably, and it's really ridiculous that they did this thing for whatever reason. But I have a feeling it's not something that would be pretty.
Okay.
Yeah, but I really appreciate what you guys have done, and as far as picking up the ball and running with it. You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Ron.
Thank you. Is that anything else?
Thank you.
Okay.
I got just an observation with Brian. I really enjoy having a meeting this time of the day.
In the afternoon,
I mean, going home at 9:30 is not no fun.
Mhm.
We've, that's been brought up,
It was touched on and we were gonna talk about it. You guys were gonna talk about it.
yeah, well, I think it's a great idea.
yeah, and and I don't have a problem either way, Brian probably does, but, on meeting times, and I think the only thing I've heard is the public input, some people.
There's so many ways though that people can communicate with us that, online, I mean, everywhere.
So with
I
the
think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Public input
Well,
at the end of the meeting still puts it over. Like,
Yep.
That's the other thing I think we need to look at is that this Zooming,
Ron,
yeah,
What's that?
Yeah, public comment is over.
yeah, that's what I thought.
What were we talking about?
Oh, just me,
I just
Dale
made a
brought up.
comment, I really like having a meeting.
You don't want to hear from the public. That's what it sounds like.
No, we did.
Actually, in summer it is a problem for me, day meetings.
I was thinking we'd do it seasonal.
Fine.
6 months,
I can
6
live with it
months.
In the winter time, the summer it's a pain in the butt, 'cause
I
I put
bet.
my day right in the middle.
Yeah, it would best.
My days end late in the summer and I come, it's easy to quit early, but it's hard to come and then go back.
And there's no reason we couldn't split it seasonally.
It's fine
Yeah,
with
all
me.
of a sudden.
Yeah. You do it late October or however you wanna do it, that's fine.
Staff's all for that. I mean, it's not a fun
The
drive
staff
to make a
likes
night
that,
like that,
you
so.
know, you guys want to know your day, it's
and I
fine.
like,
Well, we can talk about it later, I was just making a comment, I like going,
I'm always
I mean, I
open.
like Jimmy John's, but not for dinner.
Well, I'm always open to whatever makes.
Well, we could always do it at the end, like you said, public comment can be done at 5:30 when we're done, so there's an opportunity there.
who did that guy used to bring us trees?
We've never had it consistently in the middle of the afternoon, we might get more people.
Yeah.
I know we would in the winter time.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. We could start doing that if you want, I mean, while we're
Ever
still.
since- Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I just, cause ever since COVID, we haven't had that much public input, to be honest. It was some pretty good before that, but. Since COVID, it's just kind of the momentum changed and there just isn't that many
Well-
people that.
It's really good we have it on the front page of the paper too.
Well,
Yeah.
that's another.
Yeah, that's a plus.
That's another
It's been
point.
very cool.
Yeah, we still need to accommodate it, whether it's significant or not.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let us know if you want to start it, we could do it as early as the 18th.
Let's do it.
I'm doing it, I'll do it, of course.
Just make it at 3:00.
3:00.
I'm for it. Yep, 3:00, and then Brian, send us your schedule and we'll decide when to go back
Old
to.
farts need to go to bed early, I get it.
That's right.
Well, but then we can look at,
We'll worry about it.
I'm prepared to be.
yeah,
We'll worry about it later in spring.
Yeah, we can change with the time change or whenever you want to do it.
It's, what does staff think of that?
We love it. I mean, well,
Nobody's
I just-
saying nothing. Who wants to walk
till 9 o'clock?
I had that.
we talked about it. We love this time. It's much better than having to stay late, so.
Frankly, I get sleepy by 8 or 8:30.
Yeah.
We wear you
I
out.
shot by that time of night.
Yeah.
I think it's nice, whatever we gotta do.
I'm just waking up then, you guys.
We'll plan it on the 18th and then we can talk about when to change back.
Okay, all right.
Perfect.
Okay,
done.
thanks. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay,
Thank you.
You saw the hammer before.
Well, a long time, I thought there was a number one.
I wonder if that happened at the county.
That's what I.
You're itching.